Welcome to another episode of Around the Campfire. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Jaimie Somlai, Marketing Director at Northwoods, and today I'm joined by Katelyn Goerke, our UX Research Lead, to talk about all things user experience. And Katelyn isn't just a UX expert. She has a ton of knowledge in other areas, social media, digital strategy, email marketing, all of those good things. And she's even taught classes at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee over the past couple of years. But Katelyn, you recently had a big move and you left us and left the good lands for the city of brotherly love.
I did. Live in Philly now.
We do love Philly, so we understand. But how's it going so far?
It's very good. It's hotter than Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love being on the East Coast. Miss
Nice.
Wisconsin, but I love being on the East Coast.
Yes, we miss you here too. But you're still a Packers fan, right? You haven't gone over to the Eagles side yet?
Well, I'm not much of a football fan to begin with.
Okay.
So I feel like I
Okay.
just kind of fits in and out.
Go with the flow wherever
I just
you
go
are.
with the flow. Let's go with the flow.
Well, they have a really good fan base in Philly, so
They
you
do.
might get swept up in all of the Eagles mania. So yeah.
We do have a cheese head sitting downstairs, so we'll have to hide that in a
Ooh.
dark corner.
Oh, yeah, I don't think the Philly fans are gonna like that a whole lot.
No.
You can just put it on when you talk to those of us back in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
we feel better that you haven't gone over to the dark side quite yet.
Not completely.
Not completely. So, well, all right. Let's talk about UX. So UX isn't, of course, a new field, but it's been around for a while. But there seems to be a lot more interest in it over the past few years, and more kind of specific areas of expertise emerging within it. And even here at Northwoods, we're a great example of that. Our UX practice really wasn't formalized in name until just a year or so ago. Before that, we always talked about UX strategy as digital strategy, but we were essentially talking about UX, so just using different terminology. But now it seems like a lot of our clients and the prospects that we talk to have a deeper understanding of UX. They're more comfortable with the term. They understand kind of what it means and exactly kind of what it can do for their businesses. So that prompted us to create, you and another colleague, to really create a formal UX practice. So we thought this would be a great time to dive into all things UX on our podcast. But before we do that, if anyone in the audience is new to Northwoods or doesn't know, we are huge fans of s'mores. We kind of consider it our signature snack. So the first question I always have to ask every guest is the single most important one of every episode. And that's, what kind of chocolate do you prefer in your s'mores?
Ooh, okay. So I do sometimes enjoy, if I'm feeling fancy, some Nutella. That's always a good time.
Ooh,
However,
good
I would
one.
say I'm a purist. I'm
Are
a
you?
Hershey's chocolate.
Ah, yeah.
Maybe it's my move to Pennsylvania. I'm 2 hours from Hershey, Pennsylvania now.
Maybe you can go tour the plant
But
there.
yeah, but I'm a pure. I love just a simple Hershey's milk chocolate bar. Just
Nice,
break it apart. Fits perfect.
nice.
Perfect s'more.
Awesome. Yeah, at least you always know you're going to get a good s'more with Hershey's.
Yeah,
Like you said, you can't go wrong. So
yeah.
perfect. Yeah, the Nutella though, that's one I haven't actually considered before. So that's an
It's
interesting one.
good.
Is
It's pretty
it?
good. It's automatically melty because it's already kind of a
Oh
spread.
yeah,
It's good.
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to give that a try next time I do my s'mores. Thanks for the tip.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've answered that most critical question, we'll get back to the second most important reason we're here today, and that's to talk about UX again. So I guess we will talk about UX instead of s'mores. So I think a really good place to start is maybe just defining exactly what UX is and the value that it offers to various organizations. So I guess I'm curious, like, how do you usually explain UX to clients and prospects?
Yeah. So I would say at a basic level, UX is user experience and everything about how someone engages with a website and how we can make sure they have the best experience possible. And I think part of the reason why so many people are paying a lot more attention to UX nowadays is that it's, if we go back 5, 10 years, having a website was it was a goal, right? Not everyone had a website. It was, as long as you were on the internet, you were fine. Where now I feel like everyone has a website. So the question then becomes, do you have a good website? Can people actually do
Yeah.
what they need to do on your site? And really that's like the core premise of UX is thinking of the needs of the users who are coming to your website, understanding what it is that they need from you as a business, and making sure your website can accomplish that for them, making sure that someone can come to your site and accomplish all the things that they need to do, get everything that they need from you easily and efficiently, and while understanding your branding and company culture, and getting everything that they need from you in a very simple and easy way. And really for us, a lot of that starts with making sure that we can back all of it with data and research, and then
Mhm.
applying that all the way through the process. And that's really the core tenet of our UX practice.
That's awesome. No, that's a really great way and a very understandable way to explain it. And I think that's a good segue into the next question I have for you, which is, within you kind of mentioned data as part of the UX practice work. So I know within our own UX practice, there's your role, which is UX research role, and
Mhm.
you're very focused on that data piece and understanding what users are doing. And then there's really the UX design role as well. And you're both working, you and the designer are both working hand in hand. So how do you guys actually kind of work together? Where are the handoffs that occur, and what are things that clients and prospects need to know about the difference between your role and a design role?
Yeah, for sure. I think UX is really both. It's both the data and the research that you do to understand how someone's using your website, and also how it's applied on the site, how the content looks, the actual design of the site, how things are laid out. Really, all of that is UX all together. And for us, we do split that into separate roles. We have our researchers, which is my side of the house, and then we have our designers who focus on kind of applying that. So on the research side, really what we're focused on is gathering all the data that our designers need to apply it. So we're talking to users, we're looking at Google Analytics, looking at heat maps, seeing where people are clicking on different pages. We're really trying to understand how someone's using the website right now, where they're getting hung up, what's working, what's not working, and then also talking to the business who owns the website, understanding what do they want their website to do. Does it align with what users want to do on the website? And really gathering all that data to make recommendations about what is the site organized, or how is the site organized, what content's on the website, how are things, kind of structured from a data perspective, how do we best make sure that someone can do something on the website based on all this research that we're gathering. And really the handoff comes into, once we have a really solid understanding of how someone is using the website with all of that data, we go and we make a site map that says this is how we think the site should be laid out. We make recommendations for content that says, this is the content that should be on this page, and here's all the data that says why. And then we go and we start talking to the designers. And usually our designers, at least here at Northwoods, are involved throughout that process. They're on the initial kickoff meeting, hearing all the pain points that the client has. They are, we're talking to them as we're finding key data that we think is going to be really important to them. And then once, they actually come in and start, putting color to things and laying the page out and things like that, we're going back to them and saying, oh, this looks great, but maybe you should move it a little higher on the page. And here's the
Mhm.
data that supports that. So it's really for us, we really work together the entire time. We're much more involved in the beginning, they're much more involved in the end. But
Sense,
our
yeah.
whole process is, taking all this data, applying it to the designs, making sure the site looks great, but also is
Mhm.
functional based on all this data that we've gathered.
That's awesome. So I really like the fact that the designer comes in at the beginning of the project too and
Mhm.
hears what customers are saying, what users are saying, and really absorbs that too. So it
Mhm.
really is kind of a seamless process between the research work that you're doing and then the design that is informed by that. So that's very cool. And it kind of goes to the concept that, we always talk about that websites need to both look great, they need to be usable, they need to work well, which in theory seems like it should be pretty easy to accomplish. And you make it all
Mhm.
sound so great and simple. But we know in reality, it can be incredibly challenging to accomplish both of those things, to have a site look really good and have it be incredibly usable and create that great user experience. So, especially, I think we run into that a lot when we've got a lot of complicated data and third-party integrations into the site. And not all great design lends itself to a great user experience, and vice
Yep.
versa. So if you can share maybe just a little bit more or an
Mhm.
example of a project where the research and the design really came together to produce
Mhm.
both, the great look and the usability as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where you're like, it's really hard to sometimes get both. How I've described it to people before is like, maybe it's because I recently bought a home, but it's kind of like a house, in that, you want, the paint to look really nice. You want to have nice artwork on the walls, but you still want like the plumbing to work and you want to be able to wash your dishes and you want to be able to, the lights to turn on. You need it to be able to do the basic house things, but also look nice. And I think websites are
Right.
often kind of the same.
That's a great
Um,
analogy. Yeah.
and in terms of like a project, I think, we see it all the time. That kind of stands out to me is we were working with an association of doctors, and they had a very kind of an older site. It had a ton of stuff on it. And lots of the navigation very much needed to be cleaned up, things to be kind of reorganized and cleaned. But we were doing some research. We were talking to users. We were actually hosting focus groups
Mm.
of doctors who were part of this association. And one of the things I would ask them is, well, what do you do when you go on the website? What information do you access? And I started to notice through these focus groups that there were certain things that were just never being mentioned. So I started asking about it. Do you access these resources that are available on the website? And the answer was that's available, that's possible to do. So
Oh no.
from a from a data perspective, I was like, oh, we need to make this prominent. I need to put this in the navigation, make it really clear. Then, so I find this data, I make this recommendation, I start working with our designer, and she's looking at this and she's like, well, we should lay this out so that there are cards. And so someone can scan through everything available, and then let's have a little description so that they can see it all really visually on the page as well. So it was a really nice example of we gathered this data, this is clearly a problem, and I want to make it more prominent, and I want the page to be easy for someone to understand that. And the designer could come in, take that piece of data and say, okay, here's the content I have, here's the problem I know that's been identified and proven with data. Here's how I would recommend this page is laid out and this is structured. And here's the colors I would use that align with the brand and everything like that, so that it looks really nice. It's also a really effective way to understand that content and that understand better what those resources are, so that someone can actually access it and use that through the website.
That's awesome. That's a really good example too. I remember that project now that you say that as well. So yeah, very good example of design and data working together. So I think another thing that we run into a lot here is helping clients understand the value of a one-time UX project versus
Mhm.
the long-term benefits of doing more ongoing UX, where you're consistently researching, you're making changes to your site based on the data, ongoing data and results, that you're finding through that ongoing research. So maybe talk a little bit about the differences between one-time UX project that's maybe part of a website redesign and
Mhm.
more of that ongoing UX work.
Yeah, I think they both have their place. So for a one-off project, what I would look at is really understanding like which is the right one to do. I would look at what the project it is that you're working on. So if you're doing any sort of major change, so you're completely redesigning your website would probably be the clearest example, but say you're adding a significant amount of content. We've had it where someone has
Mm.
purchased another organization, acquired a company. They need to incorporate all of that company's assets and things like that into their website. Anytime you're doing any major change, it's probably good to do a sort of one-off project. And we'd approach it a little bit differently. We would take the time to really do a deep dive into how the website's performing. We'd maybe run some testing to see, if there's any technical issues that we might want to clean up as well while we're making these larger changes. We might even recommend doing some user research, hosting some focus groups, running a survey, some of these like one-time things where you can get a ton of data all at once that can help us to really understand holistically what's going on so we can make some better recommendations to inform that major change. And I would really recommend that to anyone making any sort of major change at all, because anytime you're making a change like that, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing, that the change you're making is what is a good fit for your users, that they can, still accomplish everything that they need to accomplish on the site, and that whatever you're adding meets their needs. In terms of an ongoing effort, I think anyone could benefit from ongoing UX. I'm a little biased, but I do think that anyone could benefit from that. And really, the goal is a little bit different. You don't need to be making really any changes on your website to benefit from doing something on an ongoing basis. It's really, ongoing UX is really about understanding over time how someone's using your site and using that data to make little changes. So maybe it's that you don't need to add a ton of content to your site, but you're suspicious that maybe a page isn't performing as well, or you aren't getting as much as you'd like to a form. We can do some sort of ongoing testing and try out different things over time and see how the data changes and things like that. I think it's always a good idea to be running some sort of an ongoing, you could run like a little survey on your site on an ongoing basis, keeping an eye on how your analytics changes over time to make sure that there aren't any major changes in that. Keeping an eye even on your SEO could help improve your user experience to understand how someone's getting to your site and whether they're understanding who you are from, the search that they came in from, if they're, if it's a valid search that is applicable to your business. Really, ongoing isn't about making sure that the big change you're making is effective, but making sure that your website is good for your users over time and stays effective over time. So one-off, good for your big change. Ongoing is good in making sure that your website remains a useful tool for our users and that, you don't slip or, it doesn't become unuseful over time.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. That's a great way to describe it, the differences between the two. Are there certain types of businesses that you see benefiting more from that ongoing UX, like a complicated type of e-commerce business or anything like that? What are those types of industries that you see could benefit the most from that?
Yeah, for sure. Larger sites in general, if you have a lot of content on your site, it's just a lot more to keep an eye on and a lot more that could change over time or things like that. So any sort of a large site, I would say, probably is a good contender. Anyone who is making changes regularly to your website. So some websites, some businesses could just kind of put their site up and it can just sort of function on its own for 6 months. So you don't really need to touch it. Not that they couldn't benefit, but they wouldn't benefit as much from someone who's making regular changes. Because if you're making regular changes to your site, well, there's a lot more things you could change that could impact that user experience. So if you're making those changes all the time, you probably want to make sure that you're making the right changes over time. E-commerce kind of, has a complicated, lots of data going on. That's something I would say could probably benefit. And then the last category I would say is sites with a lot of traffic. So if you have a lot of people coming into your site and it's a huge important thing for your business, for your marketing, if it's, a major factor in the success of your business, you probably want to take the time to do some ongoing work to make sure that it remains as effective as you need it to be for being, such a big important part of who you are as a business.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's really less about industry. It's more about complexity and how much content you have and how much traffic you're getting to your
Yeah.
site. That's really good to know. Is there anything that you can share about the different types of research tools that you use to do testing?
Yeah, I think the really cool thing about that too, kind of building on that, is that a lot of them are free tools. So it's something that anyone can be using. I think our biggest, most important tool that we use is Google Analytics, which is completely free. Anyone can add that to your site. Anyone can access that information. It takes probably some learning to know how to read it and understand what you're being told and what the data is saying. But Google Analytics is an awesome tool. We recommend that anyone put it on your site, and it lets you see just where people are going, how they're engaging with your content. Really awesome tool. Another thing we often will do is heat maps. So we'll run heat maps, which basically show us on different pages of the website hot and cold zones of where someone is clicking, how far down the page they're scrolling, just to better understand how someone is engaging with your web pages. And what that can be really helpful is, are they even seeing the stuff that you want them to see? I was just looking at a heat map the other day where I could see the big call to action that someone wanted them to find, a big, find right there, big button, and no one's scrolling down that far on the page. So really, simple UX thing is just move it higher on the page. And then that becomes a lot more valid. Other things we do, we look at search engine optimization. So we look at what keywords the site's ranking for, just to get an idea of how someone's coming into the site, what they're expecting to get. There's another tool we really like called Screaming Frog, which lets us see kind of the technical health of the website. very funny name for a tool, but a very good tool. Lets us see technical health because that can all impact the user experience as well. So yeah, it's a real combination. We also just look at sites. What does the content look like? How are things structured? And, can we see any potential issues? We want to see if there's data that can support. The last thing I'd probably talk about is user testing. So this is something that can be either a one-off or an ongoing thing where we ask users through an online tool to complete tasks on a website and see if they're able to easily complete those tasks. Also, just a really valuable way of seeing where someone might get hung up and how we might be able to improve that experience. So lots of different things we can do, lots of different tools out there to do them, and all of it kind of leading to just gathering as much data as possible to support those changes that we're recommending.
That's awesome. And I know too, you also sometimes will do focus groups depending on, the nature
Yes.
of the particular project. And how do those kind of work? How do you manage those?
Yeah, user research and kind of diving into actually talking to people. Those are fun. We typically do them remotely. So we roast them over Teams typically or Zoom or another digital tool. And yeah, we host typically hour-long meetings of about 8 individuals or less at a time. And we just talk to them about the website that we're looking at. We might bring up pages, ask where they get hung up, walk through different processes on the website. I love doing user research and, whether it's a focus group, a one-on-one interview, run surveys sometimes, because it really lets us, get to the why of why things might be
Mm.
going wrong. We can use Google Analytics to say this page is getting a lot of traffic or this page isn't getting a lot of traffic, but we can't understand why so that page is getting that traffic. When we go to a focus group, we can sit down and say, what pages are you going to? Why do you go to them? Do you ever consider going to this content? Why not? And we can really learn a lot more of the context behind it, which can be really helpful in making recommendations as to, this is important to your users. We can hear directly from them and say, this is what we need to do. And here's all of the data, both from them and from your website, that supports that it's the right decision to make.
That's awesome. Okay, well, you got me really excited about UX, and now I think I kind of want to come work on your team, Caitlin. So,
Come on over.
not that I don't love marketing, but it's just fascinating what you guys do. So, that's awesome. Is there anything else before I ask you about your favorite UX project that you've done? Is there anything
Ooh.
else that you want to share around just UX in general that you think could be helpful for our listeners that you haven't already talked about? Talked about a lot.
I've talked about a lot. I would
Yeah.
say the one thing is I think I've been working in UX or some version of this type of work for a while now. And I think what's been really helpful for me and like seeing what's been really exciting to see is that other people are really starting to see how important it is. I think I could just stress that so much is if you're doing any major change to your website, starting with some UX research, starting incorporating UX into the design of the site, really making sure that you're meeting the needs of your users is just so important nowadays. Because like I said earlier, the table stakes is that you have a website, you need to just have a better website now. Your
Right.
website has to be good and meet the needs of your users. There was
Yeah.
a study that came out somewhat recently that says that Google is now using the user experience of a website to influence your rankings in search engines as well, how prominently they
Mm.
put it in the search. It's just becoming so much more prevalent that you have to have good user experience on your site in order for it to be an effective website. Just kind of the way it is. So
Yeah.
that's just what I would probably emphasize the most.
That's a really good emphasis. I think the other thing too we didn't touch on, but that is also really important is on the client side, and I've been on the client side before too, you get so caught up in organizationally, your own structure, the way you do things internally. And then you'd have, John in finance who's like, I really want to change this on the site. I don't think it's working. I
Yes.
don't like it. And the UX research piece takes all of that subjectivity out of the equation and just, like you said, focuses on the users and what the users need so that you could go back to John in finance and say, well, this is what we found, and this
Yeah.
isn't something that is worth changing because this is contributing to that positive user experience. So, have you seen that a lot with some of the clients that you work with where it just takes that organizational subjectivity out of it?
Oh, so much. I feel like sometimes we get brought in to be, the third party expert, but also really for us, we can lean on data and say, there's always going to be so many opinions, right? Of this is what's the most important to this person, this is most important to this person. And we can come in and say, well, this is what's most important to your users. I think it's very easy for businesses to get wrapped up in both internal politics and what you want your site to be, and sometimes forget about your users who are actually going to be using the site, who are really the people that you need to make sure can use the site.
Good audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think having that data to support this is what they need. And so this is really what you should be focusing on. And, figuring out ways to meet your business needs but secondary, honestly, to theirs is really what's important nowadays. And we can provide that data that kind of shows why and what to do to best meet those needs. So
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
that's
See it all the
amazing.
time.
Yeah, I bet. That's so valuable. So do you have a favorite UX project that you've worked on?
I
Or do
would
you love
say
them all
I
equally?
love them all
Like
differently.
children. Yeah.
They're all my little children projects. I would say I have a favorite type of project, which is
Okay.
I think at heart I'm just like I love puzzles, and I always when I describe my job to people I say that like I'm the detective of websites where I basically go in and I hear the problem and I have to go get all the evidence that supports like the whodunit almost.
Yeah.
Um, so I love challenging websites, I guess is the way I would put it. I love websites where I can look at it and I don't immediately know the data I need to solve the problem. So I think what comes to mind right now, there's been a ton of these types of projects. What comes to mind right now is we're working on a government website and very big website, so much
Yeah.
that we have to kind of wade through. But we had the time to take the time to do a lot of data, get together a lot of data, to do a ton of research, talk to over 100 different people through focus groups and interviews and things like that. And we really had a ton of data to support the recommendations we made. And it's been really, the site's not live, we're in the midst of it right now, but it's been really exciting for me to see all this huge puzzle, kind of the pieces come together and taking all this data and now applying it to the way the site looks. And we're doing some user testing and we're able to see that some of these changes that we're making, that they're working and people can do what we want them to do. And so it's really exciting to see all these different pieces coming together and putting the puzzle that is really complicated together and starting to actually see that big picture. So I like the hard ones. I like the big
Okay.
complicated sites.
That's cool. I like that. So you were definitely in your element with this latest project.
I
So
am.
I like the
Yeah.
analogy to detective work. That is really what it is,
Hmm.
essentially. So that's very cool, Caitlin. Awesome. Well, anything else that you want to share on the UX side?
I don't think so. It was
Okay.
exciting being able to talk about this
Yeah,
with you today.
it was super fun. Thank you for letting me pick your brain and ask a bunch of questions. And I'm sure we'll do it again. We'll do a part two at some point and
Yeah.
talk more about it. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me and taking the time. So thanks to our audience for joining us. Keep an eye out for our next episode, which will be available in the next couple of weeks. You'll find all of our episodes on our YouTube channel and on our website at nwsdigital.com/around the campfire. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and we'll see you around the campfire again very soon. Enjoy some s'mores in the meantime. Thanks.